Hi there, it's Vanessa from Cove, and you're listening to the 67th edition of The Networker. This week, we're exploring how leaders rely on trusted advisors and coaches, how gratitude, when taken too far, can hold us back, and why personal branding and networking have become essential, not optional, for leaders in today's world. We'll also reflect on how younger professionals are rethinking networking altogether, how introverts can connect with confidence, why growth often turns into connection, and why the right network is always your greatest asset. Finally, we'll close with our book of the week on the art of gathering and a podcast episode about navigating competitive peers. So let's dive in. Our first story comes from Stanford and the Hoover Institution, where a new survey reveals just how much CEOs depend on outside voices to guide their decisions. More than half now work with a professional coach, and over 80% rely on a so-called kitchen cabinet of trusted informal advisors. These advisors are not board members bound by governance. They're peers, friends, former colleagues, people who can give candid, unfiltered feedback. One CEO described meeting monthly with a coach to sharpen leadership skills, while others said they've leaned on the same handful of informal advisors for more than 20 years. The shift is telling. Gone is the image of the all-powerful, solitary decision-maker. Today's CEOs see value in humility, in actively seeking perspective, and in surrounding themselves with people who challenge blind spots. Boards still play their oversight role, but the true safety net for many leaders is this informal human circle of trust. That theme of trust takes us to our next story in Harvard Business Review, which looks at the surprising pitfalls of gratitude. We're taught to practice gratitude at work, to be thankful for opportunities, for recognition, for inclusion. And the research shows gratitude improves engagement, retention, and morale. But the article highlights a trap. Too much gratitude can hold us back. It can make us accept smaller raises, heavier workloads, or even inequities, all because we don't want to appear ungrateful. The authors call this the gratitude trap. It shows up in three ways: becoming too content with the status quo, avoiding difficult conversations, and masking negative emotions. The solution is not abandoning gratitude, but balancing it with self-advocacy. That means reframing opportunities as earned, not gifted, voicing concerns respectfully but firmly, and setting boundaries to prevent burnout. In other words, gratitude should empower growth, not diminish it. From there, Forbes contributor Angelica Kopech takes us into the world of personal branding, calling it the influence effect. She argues that networking and branding are no longer luxuries. They're non-negotiables for leaders. Your LinkedIn profile, she says, is today's Times Square billboard. Within seconds, people decide if you're worth their time. The most successful leaders build a clear digital presence, speak on panels, contribute to respected publications, and above all, remain consistent in their values and their voice. Networking, too, must be deliberate. Kopech built her business by committing to short daily meetings, tracking every conversation, and reinvesting in the relationships that mattered. It wasn't random. It was systematic. Her message is clear. Your personal brand and your network are compounding assets. If you want to scale your influence, you must treat them with the same rigor as any core business function. And then, a very different voice, this time from The Observer. A student reflects on her first months in Washington, D.C., and admits that networking always felt awkward, transactional, even slimy. But through experience, she reframed it. Networking, she realized, is not about collecting contacts. It's about building genuine friendships. The people you laugh with, study with, work alongside, those are the people you'll trust years later and who may one day open doors you couldn't predict. She highlights the value of sincerity, only reaching out to people you genuinely want to know, and focusing on everyday interactions rather than forced networking events. It's a reminder that the best networks often grow organically, rooted in authenticity and shared experience. That authenticity is especially important for introverts, who often feel out of place at traditional networking events. Forbes writer Sho Dewan argues that introversion is not a weakness. It's a quiet superpower. His advice is practical. Focus on quality, not quantity. Set a goal of one deep conversation instead of 20 fleeting introductions. Use listening as your strength. People remember when they feel truly heard. Prepare a few open-ended questions in advance, and even a polite exit line to save energy. And finally, use written communication as a tool. Thoughtful comments, posts, and follow-up messages can be just as powerful as in-person exchanges. Dewan's message is liberating. Introverts don't need to mimic extroverts. They can thrive by leaning into what they already do best. And this brings us to a story from Cove, which studied an online pharmacy that grew to more than 1 million customers in just a few years. The research showed that growth wasn't just about tools or clever marketing. It was about learning and relationships. As momentum built, the company discovered weak spots in systems, measures, and customer service. The solution? Teams learned across boundaries. Pharmacists became trusted guides. Suppliers turned into partners. Employees shared data more openly. Growth became less about numbers and more about people. The lesson is powerful. Companies sustain growth not by chasing metrics alone, but by nurturing the relationships that make growth possible in the first place. Our final article from Forbes contributor John Hall reminds us that building the right network is still your greatest asset. Many shy away from networking because they think it's transactional. But Hall reframes it as an act of generosity, helping others, sharing knowledge, and creating communities of support. A strong network is what helps entrepreneurs recover from setbacks, discover opportunities, and avoid burnout. He points to the rise of Airbnb, which wouldn't have scaled without the right investor introductions. He also notes how many jobs, up to 85%, are filled through networks, not job boards. At its best, networking is not about schmoozing. It's about lifting others, being curious, and creating meaningful collaboration. In a world of constant change, that remains your greatest advantage. Before we wrap up, let's turn to this week's recommendations. Our book of the week is The Art of Gathering: How We Meet and Why It Matters. It reminds us that every meeting, every dinner, every event has the potential to be transformative if designed with purpose. When gatherings are intentional, focused on people, not just tradition, they create connection, clarity, and lasting impact. And our podcast episode of the week asks, how do I deal with a competitive peer? The advice is clear. Success is not about outshining colleagues, but about strengthening your own relationships. Build visibility with leaders, frame your outcomes in ways they value, and nurture trust with decision makers. Rising comes from connection, not comparison. That's all for the 67th edition of The Networker. The message tying it all together this week is simple. The networks we build, whether in formal circles of trust, deep one-to-one friendships, or authentic communities, are what sustain us. Until next time, stay connected, stay curious, and remember, the strongest paths forward are always built together. And don't forget, there's more to explore in your inbox with the full email edition of The Networker waiting for you there. I'll see you next time.